Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on this afternoon, especially after how crazy last week was. I know I'm personally looking forward to a nice return to normal, or relatively. And what a great way to get back into it with Ladies Who Launch. For those who this might be your first event with us, or even if you've been here before, just want to quickly introduce myself, Paget Kern, and Caitlin Bolaños. I am a program specialist here at Lilly, and Caitlin is our Senior Associate Director. And through Lilly, we coordinate the reason we're all here this afternoon, Ladies Who Launch, as a way to connect our women interested in entrepreneurship, innovation, and investing, and build a community that supports and encourages one another, as well as learn from women who are killing it in these industries. So these events serve as a reminder that as females, we're not destined to be at it alone on our entrepreneurial journey, and that there is a breadth of networks and ways to bring us all together. For those that attended Mercy Grace's talk a couple of weeks ago, you experienced our new format. But for those that couldn't make it, for the spring being virtual once again, we wanted to bring back the original vision of community building and networking. So as an overview of this hour, we'll get to hear from our wonderful speaker, Amy Vandaveer Novak, ask her any questions you have, and then we'll break out into smaller groups to really discuss what we learned and meet one another. So last time we explored entrepreneurial etiquette in the startup world and making your transition into these industries effective. So we wanted to dive a bit deeper into this theme of preparing for a startup or investing or really any entrepreneurial role. And a really impactful element, first step even for some is figuring out who you are, building a personal brand and presence based off of that, and then making sure it resonates with wherever you're trying to go or whatever you're trying to do. So really knowing how to communicate your value and that whoever is hiring, investing, or in the network you want to grow sees and understands it. So with that, I would love to kick things off and introduce you to Amy Vandaveer Novak. She is the Senior Professor of Practice of Marketing at the University of Houston, where she teaches professional selling, personal branding, business communications, and international marketing. Quite the mouthful. She's earned several teaching awards, and for very good reason. Her breadth of experience goes far beyond UH, from industries like tech, publishing, education, and roles in recruiting, marketing, and sales, all which have made Amy quite the force to be reckoned with when it comes to professional and personal marketing. She's sharing the knowledge through keynote speeches and training individuals and companies, including us today. And with that, Amy, thank you again so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paget, for a wonderful introduction, and Caitlin for having me as well. I'm excited to speak with all of you today. Just kind of real quick, what we're going to do is kind of run through, do an introduction for personal branding, and then open it up to Q&A at the end, as Paget mentioned. So I'm excited to be with you because I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. In fact, my grandfather in 1945 quit Dow Chemical in Freeport, Texas, and started a bottled water business. Now, who knew? Everybody told him in 1945, Jim, nobody's going to pay for water. And if we all know, especially from last week, bottled water is a saving grace in today's world, right? So I'm excited to speak with you about how to identify what you bring to the table and clearly and concisely communicate it effectively to the marketplace so that you can launch your careers, you can launch your enterprises, and really provide value to the marketplace. So let's go ahead and begin. So really what I'm going to do is start with the fundamentals of personal branding and then how it transitions into the virtual world that we're living in. If you will, please make sure that your microphones are muted. If you have any questions during that you want to address that you think of, and before we open the Q&A, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer those as well. And then, as Paget said, we'll have the Q&A and then closing remarks before we dive into the actual breakout sessions. So when we talk about branding, all right, Harry Beckwith, who is a great branding kind of the guru, said it's not slickness, polish, uniqueness, or cleverness that builds a brand. It is truth. And it is an Old Norse term actually meaning to burn. That's what it was, from brander. That's what the word means. And it was a way to distinguish a person's livestock from another by actually branding, this sheep belongs to me, this cow belongs to me. And so with that, it has now transformed into how we identify with things, right? That brand is burned onto our brain. And a brand experience, and this is key, because to me, a brand experience is your reputation when it comes to a personal brand. It is the sum of all points of contact with the brand. So over and over and over again, you create an expectation and a promise of value that I've experienced before. So again, over and over and over again. You can kind of think of one that comes to mind is maybe Mattress Mac and what he's constantly doing. He was on the news last week, in fact, was on national news about how, you know, he's the guy that's got the store that you can get the mattress tonight, furniture tonight, but he also is a place that gives back to the community. HEB, Starbucks, but that brand experience lets your brain know what to expect and therefore creates an image, right, within people or companies that is all of the information and expectations associated with a product or service. So here's some logos, right, that we can all identify with. And what I want you to understand is there is a brand experience and a brand image that comes to mind solely with their logos, right? The golden arches, McDonald's. I always think of Happy Meals because it was a treat when I was a kid that you got to go have a Happy Meal, right? And their French fries. Mercedes, right? Starbucks, Apple, Nike, Instagram, all of that. They conjure up the experience that we have and the image created around that because they are burned onto our brains. Right? So how are actually great brands built? Well, there's in marketing what we call the 3 C's of successful branding, right? Clarity is the first C. It's about understanding that you are really clear on who you are and you're very clear on who you are not. And think about it. It's about you've got a finite amount of time, resources, money. So if I want, and I can't be all things to all people, that's with a company, that's with a person. So where am I going to focus my energy in? Because I've got limited resources, limited time, I'm going to be really clear on what I'm good at, really clear on what I'm not good at. And then the consistency that I deliver that over and over and over again, right? That I have the understanding of what that is, consistently creating that. And then constancy is the evolution to endure over time and evolve with the marketplace. Constancy is where you are seeing, we're almost coming on the year, right, of the pandemic. Those companies who have been able to evolve and still provide value, that's where that C comes in, right? Understanding I'm clear on what I offer, I'm consistent, but now I've got to evolve. And they can be trusted to deliver value while adapting to change. Now, I've added my own 4th C, right? And it is communication. Because great brands are created and maintained, and they tell the marketplace who they are. The marketplace never defines it. So you've got to communicate. What are the values an organization stands for that you stand for? What do you offer? What is the vision that you're incorporating, right? And the one that comes to mind now is Amazon, right? If you weren't a fan of Amazon before the pandemic, you probably are now. And how you got to communicate by defining it for yourself, being transparent, authentic, and then accountable when you mess up, right? So that's when we talk about the 4th C. So when you look at it, the 4 C's of branding incorporate clarity, consistency, constancy, and then I put my 4th on top for communicating all of that over and over to yourself, being clear on for yourself, and then to the marketplace. So that's what organizations do. That's what really great, successful organizations that have billion-dollar brands do. So how does this relate to you? Well, it comes down to understanding, right? It is about branding yourself. And Rachel Quilty said this: personal branding allows you to take control of your identity and influence that impression people have of you. Because you already have it, it's just getting really clear on, does it align with who you think you are that others perceive? What is the brand experience with you? So it's essential for your company's success as you want to launch businesses, but people buy from you first. Financiers, people to come work for you, your first customers. You have to be rooted in your values and build your company around that, because it's essential for your company's success as well as yours. So when you look at personal branding, there's a great article that came out in 1999 from Fast Company. It's called The Brand Called You. That's where the term actually was first coined. And you can go find it online. It's a really interesting read. I make my students in personal branding read it and present on it. But it's a process by where people in their careers are marked as brands. And it incorporates the body, clothing and appearance, and the knowledge that they bring. All right, and creates an indelible impression that is distinguishable to them. So here's a couple examples, right? You have, political figures, right? You've got artists, you've got, communicators, you've got inventors, you've got athletes, all of these people honed in on their passion, their talents, and then created a pathway for them to be marked by what they bring to the table. All right. So what I want you is, we've got a kind of fun little interactive poll that they're going to kick off. So as you're starting to think about, what do you think of your personal brand? What's your perception as you as a brand stand? So first, is it like, what brands? I don't know. Or great in person, non-existent online. Or is it well-established in person and online? And then, hey, I'm great, I should be trademarked. So go ahead and answer one of those four, and we'll kind of see what the audience feels about personal branding and how you are established right now. And do we have the results? Has everybody? Okay, great. I didn't even do I should be trademarked either. I'm pretty good in person and online. So what I love is that, I'm going to talk about this at the end. So I'm glad I added this into the piece. Great in person, non-existent online is what I think everybody has had a challenge with this year in particular. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go in, but that gives me insight into, I kind of know what I bring to the table, but I'm not really sure how to live in this new world that we're existing in. It starts with, and this is true for the company that you want to build, just as much as it is for the brand you want to create for yourself. It starts by spending time with yourself. So I always say the place to begin is to have a cup of coffee with yourself. And I got this from a student years ago when he had several job offers. And I said, well, how did you decide? And he said, well, I had to go have a cup of coffee with myself and figure out what best aligned with who I wanted to become. And so you've got to ask yourself the hard questions, right? What do I stand for? What can I offer? Who needs my skills? And how do I want the marketplace to see me? My personality, my talents, my skills, my style, my reputation. And remember, it has to be based in truth. Go back to that communication piece, right? Authenticity, transparency. But you've got to start with yourself. And the very first fundamental is to know your values. And if you have, there's lots of value. You can go Google worksheets and stuff, like how do I do a value assessment? It percolates for like a good cup of coffee, right? It's going to percolate for a while. It's not to say this is what I stand for. Your values are your core motivators, right? Steve Jobs said this: we need to be true to who we are and what's important. So a value defined are the things that motivate us, right? They shape our decisions, they shape our attitude, which shapes our behavior. and they guide all of our decisions. So you've got to know what your values are first. And Steve Jobs was very clear on what his values were as a person. I think that I can change the world. Right. And it was based on the innovation. So he did that for himself and he did that for Apple. And we all understand that. For even if you're not an Apple fan, I guarantee you probably have a smartphone. And so that was transformative technology that changed the way in which we function today. So when you're looking at your values, go to your top 5. It's key. Identifying your top 5 values. Some people will say your top 2. Your top 5 are how you're going to make all your decisions in your life, right? Here are a couple examples. And Howard Schultz, who's a person I really admire, he's former chairman, CEO of Starbucks. He said, if people believe they share values with a company, they will stay loyal to the brand. So knowing who you are and what you stand for first, and then building your organization around it is key, because it will shape, what do I do with my money? How do I hire my people? What am I going to offer my customers? And remember, people still buy from people. People still invest in people, even if it's through technology. So identifying your values is knowing your why. Elvis Presley said this: values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything you do. So that's the foundation, right? The second is core competencies. Your core competencies are your talents, your skills, your network, your experience, your personality that make you uniquely you and are a value. So what stands out about your organization or your value proposition, right? What is it that you want to create as an organization? That is why people should be invested in it, right? What gives you the competitive advantage? Jack Welch said this, right? And he was a transformative CEO at GE back in the 90s. He had another great quote that says, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. But he also has this quote that says, an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. What are you learning? What are you passionate about that gives you a competitive advantage in the marketplace? And then those two create your value proposition, right? Larry Bird said this: a winner is someone who recognizes his God-given talents, right? To me, that's kind of your core competencies, and works his tail off to develop them into skills and uses these to accomplish his goals. So what value do you offer the marketplace as a person, as an entrepreneur, and what does your business offer? And the value proposition, as defined in marketing, is an innovation, service, or feature intended to make a company or product attractive to customers, right? It provides a declaration of intent or a statement that introduces a company's brand to customers. What do you stand for? Your values. How does it operate? Core competencies. Why it deserves your business. What are the expectations you offer? The same thing with a personal value proposition. It's kind of like a really succinct elevator pitch. But what it more clearly defines is how you operate, not just who I am, but this is who what I'm grounded in. This is what I offer you. And here's what I'm going to be able to deliver, right? So it concisely explains what makes you valuable. Creating one provides you the opportunity to clearly state the value you offer to customers and organizations. So those things, right? And really, when you think about it, a value proposition is a promise. And I love this because a lot of times in the selfie-induced social media world, people think personal branding is a bunch of personal promotion. That's not, because I don't live in that space. Personal branding is not about you. It is about putting your stamp on the value you deliver others clearly, right? Clarity, consistently, constantly, and communicating that value. And so really, it's about the keys to building your brand is understanding your values, your competencies, that succinctly communicate that value proposition that you offer. So when we look at this, right, and I love this little thing from 2020, right? Because I'm sure last January we all had wonderful goals and everything was moving forward, and it leads to clear vision, right? We're going to do this in this decade, and whoa, just kidding. But what that tells you is you've got to then adjust and adapt so that you can, but your values and your competencies don't change. They may just be adapted to how you then create that vision, right? And it is about expectations. So what do you want yours to be? Jeff Bezos, we all know him, who actually just recently said he was going to step away as CEO of Amazon, said, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So the reason I talk about the 2020 as it's going to translate now into the online piece is I have taught for 20 years. I'm in my 21st year at the University of Houston, have a passion for teaching, teach large mass sections of professional selling, 250 students each. And my biggest phrase was always unplug and engage. I didn't allow technology. I didn't allow phones. I was like, you got to look at people in the eye. You got to communicate. Well, March happened last year. And now I have a phrase that I say, plug in and engage, right? That's why I use this little cartoon here. David Del Pino Klux, who is the guy who's in charge of all online learning for our college, said this: the worst adventure is the one you never start. And everybody had their heads spinning with, how am I going to do this in this environment? And I love this to the point where Jim, who's my an esteemed colleague in the marketing department, sent this cartoon out that said, where the heck are my students? And that's a microwave, Jim, right? So it's completely changing the way in which we function. But what I took it was a challenge to learn, to adapt, and to understand I was still the expert. What I knew didn't change. My values didn't change. My passion for education around marketing, sales, branding, communication didn't change. How I delivered it did. So it's about adapting and embracing in an evolving environment, right? And that is the key of that constancy piece of the 4 C's. This is actually a quote from Darwin. It says, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And probably all of us identify so much with that from last week, right? How creative can we get to stay warm or to flush our toilets? And so it's really then understanding you can't stick with what you always knew because the market is going to change. It's going to evolve. But what you want to offer and who you are and what you stand for doesn't. It's just adapting and changing. So I love this graph. I love this slide. And this is 20% of the companies on Forbes 2020 list for the world's most powerful 100 brands were developed before 1900. So look at that. You've got Coca-Cola, GE, beer, Budweiser, right? Hermes. My favorite on the list is from 1882, Nivea. If all of us know the importance of hand cream after you have to sanitize and wash all the time, right? But what I want to highlight is you can look at that list and know exactly what those brands are and what they stand for and how over 100 years they've been able to implement those 4 C's because of the constancy piece. So when we look at personal branding and online personas, right, it's making sure that you're clear on the 4 C's and promoting your personal brand by being clear on who you are and what you offer, consistent on how you show up and what you deliver, and constant in your brand promise over time. You could be dependable, right? And then true to who you are and how you communicate by being authentic, transparent, and accountable. Because in a digital world, you have to align your online personal brand persona with your personal brand promise. Think about it this way. It's a promise of who you are going to be in person, right? When we actually get to walk in and see each other, that's what your online persona should be. And it does matter. I love this little cartoon or this little image, you know, it says Zoom meetings, right? Audio only versus with video, because we all know what that looks like today. And Folgers has done a really funny ad campaign, about the virtual world where like the mom is trying to have like her coffee in a meeting, the kids popping over, the guy's got his boxer shorts on for his meeting, and it's really making fun, but this is the world we live in. And if you are not online, you don't exist. And how you have to craft yourself, not just in the Zoom calls, but in social media does it. So what does your online presence say about you when you're meeting others? All right. And this is where I guess I didn't, here, I'm gonna do the poll too before I go to the next one. So let's do the number 2 poll, which is what is your perception of your online branding right now? So one is I don't do social media, like I'm not engaged. And I appreciate if you're not, right? But I'm gonna encourage you to kind of go outside your comfort zone and figure out where to begin, right? Number 2 is it becomes just a bunch of noise, right? Number 3 is somewhat beneficial personally and professionally. Or number 4 is love it, it's part of my daily routine. Okay, great. Somewhat beneficially, personally, and professionally. That's wonderful. That's where I think most people should be. And that brings me to the slide I actually had before, which is the museums, right? Did anybody follow any of this? It became a huge viral sensation. And it's about these wonderful museums, the Getty, the Met, and the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, how they could not have patrons come in to view their arts of work, right? And so what happened was they all created we're going to post all of our things online, and they engaged everybody with do your own interpretation of our artwork. And so you can see here, right? Girl with the pearl earring, and my favorite is the lilies with the toilet paper, right? And then this one, this like the homeschooled situation in the middle, kind of makes me laugh. And then, of course, the old American Standard now with masks on. But what they did was they had to adjust and adapt into an online space because they couldn't have people come in. Now, what they got was an audience that they never could have had before. And that is the power of being online, just like I am. I trained 1,000 sales reps on this same topic for 3M from this office twice this past summer. So you don't have to go anywhere, but now you can get to so many more people by understanding the power of that. And the biggest thing is it's not personal promotion. That's what I want you to wrap your head around. It's value, right? What is that brand promise? If you wanted to be described in 3 words, what would you want them to be? What are you most passionate about? The initiative, right, that you want to start, the entrepreneurship, the business you want to begin. How do you stay engaged? How do you communicate this? And how can then that translate into a digital world? So it's then learning and assessing your online presence, right? Knowing the 4 C's. And again, because if you're just posting and promoting, but you're not clear on your values, you don't understand your core competencies, and you don't know your value proposition, then it just does become noise. When you spend the time with yourself doing those things, those initial things, then it's clear on this is a yes, this is a no, here's how I'm going to execute. And now I'm in control of the messaging, that 4th C. Right? So here's just an example of the different social networks, right? How can you communicate them in a digital world, right? So when you look at this, go back to those values, core competencies, and value proposition, right? And how do they translate online? Are they clearly defined for you? Is it consistent in channels? So again, go Google yourself. Where are you? And then do the assessment. Okay, so if I'm on Facebook, does it align with what I've now established as my values and my core competencies? How can I change that? Right? And is Facebook the same as LinkedIn? And LinkedIn the same as Instagram and WhatsApp and different in Twitter? So again, that creates that branding piece in your brain. It burns over and over and over again. And it's the constant in the providing the value. So it's not just saying, oh, look at me. It's saying, wow, I just did this really cool seminar. I did this. I share the knowledge. And the benefit of being online is my knowledge is not just one-to-one with who I'm talking with in person. It's one-to-many, which then elevates your experience, your credibility, and your brand. So look at doing a SWOT analysis of your digital personal brand. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats that can be aligned with them? When it all comes down, the most important thing is to recognize there's only one you. You're the one that has the idea for this business. You're the one that has the passion. You're going to do the blood, sweat, and tears. Like I said, I know I came from a long line of business owners, and, you know, Pops had a brilliant idea when he wanted to do the bottled water. And it's staying true to you. Judy Garland has a wonderful quote that says, always be a first-rate version of yourself rather than a second-rate version of someone else. So, and I work with so many students that sometimes they'll look us like, look, somebody's doing this, let me try that. Somebody's doing this. And I'm like, swim your lane, run your race. It's yours. So you can get really sometimes distracted with other people's success or ideas, but there's only you and your experience and what you bring to the marketplace. And you have to, as an entrepreneur, believe it more than anybody else, have passion more than, because you're going to put it all in than anybody else, right? And the benefits of doing this for yourself is it creates authenticity and transparency. You now are clear on what you stand for, what you bring, and the value you offer. And then it also really sharpens the ability to make decisions. This is a yes, this is a no based on what I bring. And then identifies direction and purpose, right? Now that I know what I offer and what I stand for and what I bring to the table, it directs me. It's clear on what I want my company to achieve and who I want to become. Encourages and builds confidence, because when you know who you are and you're excited about the offering that you bring and the idea that you have and the business you want, that is more valuable than anybody else, right? You have to believe in it for yourself if you want anybody else to invest in it. And it results in efficiency and productivity. Carl Jung said this, your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. So remember that your personal brand is a promise of expectations. What do you want yours to be? Right? Your brand identity tells people who you are, what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. And so that ends this session. So hopefully it gave you a little bit of food for thought. And at this point, I'd love to open it up for any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Yes, if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself or post it in the chat. To get just a question on my end, I know I took a lot of notes and I have a lot to work on myself. A coffee session coming up soon. For those that are fresh on the scene, so freshman students or, you know, somebody who's just getting really involved in looking for a job or an internship and are just very new to maybe LinkedIn or whatever platform it may be, should they focus on developing a personal brand early on, or should they be more focused on looking for those skills to get or those accomplishments that would later feed into this brand?
That's a great question, Paget. And I think, because remember, if you're going to ever reach out for an internship or a mentorship or someone that you admire, you want to learn from, they're going to ask you who you are, first and foremost. So you still, I think, have to be really clear on what are my values and what is it that I think I do well that I want to build upon. It may be like raw talent where you don't have a really strong skill set, but being really clear on, I really love this. This is easy for me. This is what I would do for free. This is what people come to me for. Mm-hmm. Helps you then have direction. And what that means is, because I've had students come to me, you know, and those who are clear about who they are and what they want, I'll invest time in. The ones who aren't, I'm like, okay, go, I'm gonna give you these questions to answer. If you figure that out, you can come back to me. So I still think it's really important to do the initial work and then get clear on, I really like this. This is exciting for me. This is easy. And then use that as a launching point to learn from others who've been there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And kind of playing off of what you've mentioned of building this online presence, adapting, and I'm sure some of us, even if we don't do social media, we're online in some form, even if it's just via email. What are some things that you've noticed that maybe would negatively affect our personal brand that maybe we're not even aware we're doing? And maybe it's something on social media, maybe it's in the wording we choose. And what are some ways we could turn those maybe subconscious choices around?
Right. So I think what you want to do is the hardest thing is I coined this term called blissfully unaware, right? When you're unaware, you can be blissful that you don't know that you're your biggest obstacle. But the moment you become aware, you can do two things. You can change, or you can say, fine, take it or leave it. I think what you want to do, and it's the evaluation of, where am I stuck? Where am I not accomplishing what I want? And then kind of doing that, but then asking people who know you well the hard questions and being willing to listen to their answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, so it's like, well, if I want to accomplish this, right, here's who I want to be, or here's who I want to work for, here's the company I want. Asking, what gets in the way? What do you see me personally, right? How I'm showing up. And then, but you got to be willing to listen to the truth and not argue, and if you aren't sure, then you say, okay, well, can you give me an example of this? I remember I had a conversation with my dad like a couple weeks ago, and I called him about something. I said, well, was there something? And he said, well, can I be honest with you? I said, well, that's why I'm calling. And he was like, okay. And I was like, here it is. And I had to hear it. So you have to be willing to look, and that's true for any successful business, any successful entrepreneur. You've got to be really honest with yourself. But remember, you have to go to someone that knows you well and has your best interests. Don't go at everybody. You got to narrow that field on who are your champions that are going to be honest with you, because otherwise everybody will tell you to change everything. And that's not going to be a benefit to you. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a question from Anna here. It says, this is a lifelong exercise. Yes, I just did this again. I got married last March, right before the crazy pandemic. And then I had to go online. I thought, it's time for me to do my values again. And it says, you're an empty nester, single lady, finance professional. What's next? So the question to you is, do you want to leverage your background, or do you want to go totally something new and different? You want to answer that, or you don't know yet? Because I think what you have to do is then decide, because I think what's great with where you are is you got a whole other half to play, right? So leveraging your background. So there's a lot of different things. If you've had a successful career, you can do seminars like this. That if you are interested in educating, and that to me is always kind of a second career act for people who have been successful in industry. If you like that, the easiest way is to do things like this, or it's then looking at who other, and again, I said, Judy Garland, be a first-rate version of yourself, but you can find inspiration from other people that maybe had your background and had a second act. What does it look like? What can you learn from them? What can you glean from them that might inspire you? So I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope that it helped.
I have a question for you, Amy. So I really liked what you said, that personal branding is not personal promotion, and it's about providing value. And I think that's even like in the work that we do with Lily and some of our marketing efforts, like, oh, this feels like self-promotion, but it shouldn't be. It should be about adding value. Can you give some examples about maybe from like someone in particular or a company in particular, but like this difference between like self-promotion and adding value, like what, like as individuals and as our personal brand, what kind of value can we add digitally when it's just, there's a lot of information and already like value out there?
Right. So I'm going to use actually Anna as an example, since she said she's the seasoned finance professional. Okay. So that means she has insight in a really turbulent, economic, uncertain environment to help people. And so it's a matter of, you can do a couple things. You can do content creation, which is, hey, look at this. Have you looked at your 401k? Are you doing with your, like, what are the top 3 things if someone just lost their job, you would tell them to do with their finances? Or, you know, if they've, you know, or what are some different things that they can do? Or if they've got, you know, kids going off to college. And college, we all know, Lily, you know, Rice and I know, it's a different ball game now in this online environment. Does it make sense to pay full tuition when your kids are still in your home? That kind of stuff. So there's value in your knowledge that you can share and then create, so that's one way to do it. You create content and you post it and share it. LinkedIn is a wonderful place to do that. Or you find other articles and you share with others. The other thing is to then give credit where credit is due. Lift other people up, recognize who you've learned from, organizations that have done a good job. And again, that's where you can help around that.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first a comment. So I'm an owl now, but I was a coug once upon a time.
I know. So you were in PES, right?
Yes.
Hi, Sophie. How are you?
Good. Yeah, me and my sister, we did it at separate times. So we always talk about how your class in the PES program was honestly one of our favorite things. Neither of us went into sales. She went into marketing. I went into supply chain. But that class was so beneficial. And I think about it, you know, and related to things that I'm currently doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
When I saw that you were coming here, I was like, I have to come back because that was one of my favorite classes. So it's great to see you again. So I did have a question. I'm not really in the entrepreneurial world. I'm kind of in supply chain and focusing on talent and people development. So I'm more focused on the personal branding side, but one of your slides, you kind of pulled up all the different social media outlets and, you know, kind of keeping the message consistent across the board. So how can you do that with all the different types of audiences that are there in each, you know, platform, like LinkedIn being professional and Instagram being more casual? How can you kind of keep the message consistent across the board?
Right. That's a great question. It's so good to see you. Please tell your sister I said hello as well. So I think it's because we're a multifaceted person, right? So you're not always going to be in your professional realm. But what I think is that if your number one client saw, right, your Instagram, would it be like, oh, that's a little not what I expected? Or is it more, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know Tofi did that. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. So if you're, you know, your best friend or your grandma who's on your Instagram feed went to LinkedIn and they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. Does it align with who you are as a person? And so I think, to me, that's always the question. Is this really me? And am I confident sharing it? Now, remember, when you post, you have no control over how it will be received. So that's why really great brands manage that like nobody's business. I mean, they've got more. Twitter is the #1 customer service resource now for companies. It's crazy. So it's then understanding how you have to manage it. But I think there's nothing wrong with, here's me personally, when I'm interested, running, fishing, you know, riding, eating, and here's who I am but it's also then, remember, we get so much inundated. Does it become noise? I don't necessarily need to know what you had for breakfast. Does that make sense? So the sweet spot, and I didn't have enough time to include this, but this is a really key number. The number of posts per week in both Facebook and LinkedIn is 5. After that, the return on investment isn't as great. So for those of you who are kind of like, oh, I don't want to have to manage this because I live in that space, like I don't have time for that. 5, if you think about it. And it is Tuesdays to Fridays for LinkedIn, because it's during the work week. And then Mondays to Thursdays. And again, 5 is the number that you get the most return on investment. So when if you're looking at a consumer based company, where basically you're going to individual consumers, you can do that. But as far as talent and people want to know who you are outside of work. And we all get, this is my office, so we all get glimpses into people's worlds today more than we necessarily ever did. It's just, if what's on the wall, would I be proud that the CEO of a customer, right, or the dean of the Rice Business School, if he saw what was in my office, would I say, yep, that's a representation of me? Does that help?
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. It's just, I mean, I just feel like sometimes people use the platform so differently, but I think the interesting thing is when I actually applied for my MBA, that was the time that I really like had coffee with myself and thought about, you know, what's my story? What am I trying to tell? And now when people ask me for advice for, you know, like tips on how to apply for it, or, you know, tips for applying to the MBA, I just tell them, you know, what's your story? It all has to make sense and it all has to, you know,
right,
connect. So no, that answers the question perfectly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I've got a couple other questions. Do we have time to do that, or we want to do the breakouts?
We have time for one more question, and then I'm going to send everyone to breakouts.
Okay. So the first one was sent about the introverts, and my husband is a big introvert, and he jokes, like he said, oh my God, if anybody gave me a microphone, I would die. And he's married to me, right, who is used to the microphone. I think the most important thing is you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to shout it from the rooftops, but you do have to communicate that. And when, again, if you do the exercises, values, core competencies, what you bring to the table, then it's just part of who you are. You don't have to be the loud personality to go places. In fact, my personal favorite people are the quiet ones that they just execute and they deliver excellence all the time because they're so dependable. But you do have to understand and communicate that, so then you have other people, when you're really clear on that and your messaging is clear and you say, here's what I bring, what I value, here's what I bring to the table, here's what I want to accomplish. You let other people, because you do a good job, they become your advocates and they actually promote you because you've already provided the value proposition. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Amy, so much for this talk. I took a lot of notes. I'm sure I'm not the only one. For everyone that's on the line, I will shortly send you to a breakout room just to get to know each other and discuss some of these prompts that you see on the screen. Caitlin will post them in the chat for you. And just talk about Amy's insights. I really encourage you to stay on, and then we'll come back together for a few minutes at the very end to wrap up. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open up these breakout rooms. Amy, feel free to stay in the main session.
Okay, I will, and I'll try to answer the question in the chat that I saw that I didn't get to.
Great, yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Just a few words to wrap up today. First and foremost, thank you all for hopping on during this lunch hour. Second of all, we will be hosting the final event in the Ladies Who Launch series for springtime, or for our spring semester next Tuesday. And playing off of this theme of building skills and making that transition into a startup or entrepreneurial role even more impactful and effective. We'll be hosting a session on the female superpower with the founder and managing partner of Harbinger Ventures, Megan Bent. We're really excited to have her. She'll be talking more on the research and reasons behind women excel in entrepreneurship and investing, and then leveraging these differences we have as women and in our leadership skills to our advantage. I I don't know if Caitlin, you have anything to add to that, but we're so excited to have her. And we were so excited to have Amy today. We'll be following up sometime tomorrow with the recording of this session. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day.
Yes, I dropped the link to register for next week's event. And thank you again, Amy. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Best of luck to you.